So today we are going to start the Unit 3 in biology syllabus, which is Evolution and Diversity of Organisms. So in this lesson we are learning about the theories of evolution, how organisms evolved, starting from simple single cellular organisms to complex multicellular organisms, uh, including plants and animals. And also we are learning about the massive diversity among organisms in the living world. So, in the first part of this lesson, we are learning about the origin of life on Earth, how life first began on our planet, the blue planet or the Earth. So, before the life first originated on the Earth, the conditions of the Earth were not very much favorable for life to survive. Earth and other planets in our solar system formed about 4.6 billion years ago. So, our solar system is part of our galaxy, which is the Milky Way galaxy. And these galaxies, all of them formed gradually, and there are several theories detailing the origin of our universe and how these galaxies formed. You might have heard about the Big Bang theory, and likewise, there are several theories detailing how our universe began. So, with the formation of our universe, with time, galaxies formed and solar systems formed. So, our Earth is part of our solar system. So Earth and other planets formed in our solar system about 4.6 billion years ago. Initially, the Earth was bombarded by chunks of rocks and ice. So later, an atmosphere was formed around this solid globular mass, thick with water vapor and volcanic gases, nitrogen and its oxides, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, hydrogen sulfide. So these are the gases which are present in the early atmosphere. So those gases were released by volcanic eruptions in the early Earth. So it was a neutral atmosphere initially, and later it turned into a reducing atmosphere with low oxygen. So, when there is oxygen, it becomes an oxidizing atmosphere. Substances get oxidized with combining with oxygen. But earlier, the oxygen concentration was very low because in the volcanic gases, oxygen was not a component. Later, you'll see how oxygen concentration increased in our atmosphere. So it is with the introduction of photosynthetic organisms. Then with time, the earth cooled down, and with this cooling, the water vapor in the atmosphere condensed to form oceans, and hydrogen escaped into space. H2 escaped into space. So those times, the energy sources which were there for which generated various forms of energy, helped in various molecular formations, volcanic eruptions, lightning, extreme UV radiation from the sun, and hydrothermal vents and alkaline vents which were in the Earth's surface. Uh, then there is a theory called abiotic synthesis. So, there, what we are talking about is how this reducing atmosphere in the early Earth favored the synthesis of organic molecules like amino acids and nitrogenous bases. from inorganic molecules. So nowadays, organic molecules are formed by living organisms. But in the earlier, there were no living organisms to begin with. So organic molecules must somehow formed by inorganic molecules. So this is another theory. So then these organic molecules which are formed by inorganic molecules polymerized to form complex organic macromolecules. So simple organic molecules, they polymerize to form macromolecules like proteins and nucleic acids. Then these macromolecules, uh, some of these macromolecules gained a special ability to replicate by themselves. So the formation of first self-replicating molecules uh, was there in the early Earth. So this enabled the inheritance and evolution of early forms of life. There is a famous experiment called the Miller-Urey experiment, which was conducted in 1953, which demonstrated that organic compounds could be synthesized under prebiotic earth conditions from inorganic molecules. So the energy needed for this process was supplied by the aforesaid energy sources, such as volcanic eruptions, lightning, extreme UV radiation, hydrothermal vents, and alkaline vents. There is another hypothesis called the panspermia hypothesis, which suggests that life or organic molecules came to Earth via meteorites, that is, extraterrestrial origin. So, this diagram shows how a timeline of the formation of the Earth and how organisms evolved. So, Earth first formed 4.6 billion years ago. Then here there is the moon formation, and you can see gradually how the life began from simple inorganic molecules combining form organic compounds and then formed macromolecules, which later turned into primitive cells, which then evolved into complex multicellular organisms. So here's another diagram which shows various eons during this time scale. So this is a diagram showing the Urey-Miller experiment, or the Miller-Urey experiment. So it was performed by Stanley Miller and Harold Urey. They conducted this experiment using this special apparatus in which they sparked electricity into a chamber filled with simple inorganic molecules like methane, ammonia, hydrogen, and water vapor. Then they found that with this energy, sometimes randomly, organic molecules appear. So they devised this hypothesis and they proved that organic compounds can be generated by inorganic molecules. So this was once asked in one of your MCQs in the new syllabus. So let's move on to evolution of this biological diversity. So the theory that we believe today with regard to evolution is called biochemical evolution. So, as we said earlier, from the Miller-Urey experiment, it was proved that organic molecules can be synthesized from inorganic molecules, and there are fossil evidence showing fossils of microorganisms dating back 3.5 billion years. So that shows that the early forms of microbes evolved 3.5 billion years ago. So the hypothesis is life arose through chemical and physical processes leading to the formation of cells. So there are four major stages in this biochemical evolution. First stage is abiotic synthesis of small organic molecules from inorganic molecules. Then these small organic molecules combine to form complex macromolecules. Examples are amino acids combining together by peptide linkages to form proteins. Then nucleic acids were formed by nitrogenous bases and the sugar and phosphate backbones. Then, with the combinations of these macromolecules, earliest single cells formed. So these cells were known as protocells. We call these cells as protocells. So they are protocells are just membrane-bound organic macromolecules. Then some of these macromolecules, such as RNA, gained a special ability to self-replicate. So nucleic acids gained replication ability, which allowed inheritance, which is transfer of hereditary information from one generation to the next. So, as we have discussed, these macromolecules were enclosed by membranes to form protocells. There is a hypothesis called Haldane's primitive soup hypothesis. So this primitive soup means the early oceans. So as we have discussed, with the cooling down of the earth, water vapor condensed to form oceans. So these oceans earlier were less concentrated because there are less number of solids. So this primitive soup is the environment which was there in these earlier oceans, which facilitated the origin of microorganisms. So these organic molecules which are formed by this abiotic synthesis were dissolved in this primitive soup. And with regard to this protocell formation, you can see this is a diagram of a protocell. This is just a simple membrane-bound structure, and within this there are organic macromolecules. So first, the genetic materials which are there were RNA, not DNA. So RNA accumulated in lipid-bound vesicles, and protocells exhibited enzyme catalyzed activities. So we call these as metabolism, and also they were capable of growth, replication, and evolution. So growth, when considering the growth and division of these protocells, the growth was by lipid addition to the membranes via micelle collision. You can see micelles like this. So with micelle collision, there was lipid addition to these cells, and the division of these protocells occurred when the protocells became too large, and there was RNA self-replication and formation of daughter cells. Then there was origin of photosynthetic synthetic organisms, and with photosynthesis, there was production of oxygen, and the earlier reducing atmosphere gradually turned into an oxidizing atmosphere. The cyanobacteria were the first photosynthetic organisms which were formed 2.7 billion years ago. So these photosynthetic organisms, by photosynthesis, uh, produced their own food and oxidized Fe2 plus ions in the oceans. And also, oxygen was saturated in water bodies, which were then accumulated in the atmosphere. The impact of these photosynthetic synthetic organisms was to increase the atmospheric oxygen, which led to the evolution of aerobic respiration. And also, they accelerated the origin of chloroplasts via a theory called endosymbiotic theory. So then, finally, there was the origin of the first eukaryotes, and the first eukaryotic fossils were dated to about 1.8 billion years ago. And at first, single-celled eukaryotes were evolved, and then they evolved into multicellular organisms. And with the origin of these eukaryotic cells, it paved way to the greater morphological diversity among organisms. And the oldest known protists, which are similar to small red algae, the fossil evidence was found 1.2 billion years ago, dating back to that time. Then, after the origin of eukaryotes, there was diversification of eukaryotes, and there is an era, important period in this time, which in the Cambrian uh, era, so that is called the Cambrian explosion. So many present-day animal phyla appeared in the early Cambrian period, the so-called the early Cambrian period. So we'll discuss about the geological time scales, and we are discussing in that eons, eras, and different periods. So there was a so-called so-called late Proterozoic uh, era. Animals uh, were first diversified, including sponges or porifera, cnidarians such as sea anemones, and mollusks. And also, there are evolutionary milestones. So, the porifera or sponges evolved 700 million years ago. So, we get to know that from this DNA analysis. And also, ancestors of arthropods, chordates, and other phyla originated 670 million years ago. So, first food chains emerged as animals consumed algae or plants, which these algae and plants acted as primary producers, and animals acted as consumers. Then organisms started to colonize land. Uh, Earlier, they were confined to the oceans, then they started colonizing land. So, this colonization of the land began 500 million years ago. So, it was first done by fungi, then by plants, and by animals. So, you learn various adaptations of plants to live in the land. So, the earlier or evolutionary primitive plants were more towards their adaptations were there to live in a wet environment. Right, later, plants adapted to live fully in the land environment. So the adaptations that are there in plants, the vascular systems for water and mineral transport. Then there were waxy coatings to prevent water loss when they live in the land. And there was emergence of roots, stems, and leaves. This is 40 million years ago. There were symbiotic relationships between plants and fungi that colonized the land. Symbiosis means plants help the fungi in various processes, and the fungi helps the plants for some other processes. So the first land animals were arthropods, which included insects and spiders. there were tetrapods. So earliest formed tetrapods were 365 million years ago, and they evolved from lobe-finned fishes. So this is how they invaded the land. The humans evolved or diverged from other primates 6 to 7 million years ago. So this is also very important, this uh, time period. And the 6 to 7 million years ago thing is important because that is the first time in our history humans evolved. So Homo sapiens, the current species of humans, originated 195,000 years ago. So we are quite new to this world. So this diagram represents different eons and eras and periods in the geological time scale. This is how the Cambrian explosion took place. This is showing how current human, Homo sapiens, evolved from the primates. So now let's move on to geological eons and eras of evolution. So there are four eons. The Hadean eon is the first one in which the Earth originated. Then we have the Archean eon, in which the oldest rocks were formed, and the appearance of the prokaryotic cells is found in this Archean eon, and there was increase in atmospheric oxygen with this photosynthetic prokaryotes. Then there is the Proterozoic eon, where the oldest eukaryotic cells were formed, and diverse algae and soft-bodied invertebrates were also formed in the Proterozoic eon. And the most important eon that we need to discuss is Phanerozoic eon, which encompasses three eras, which are the Paleozoic era, Mesozoic era, and the Cenozoic era. So, what is an eon and an era? What is the difference? So, an eon is the largest division of geological time. It is used to describe vast stretches of Earth's history. So, yeah, eons span usually hundreds of millions to billions of years and encompass significant events in the planet's development. Whereas an era is a subdivision of an eon and represents a significant interval of geological time, typically lasting tens to hundreds of millions of years. So, eras are defined by notable changes in Earth geology and the life forms present during those times, such as mass extinctions or major evolutionary events. So, each eon, except the Hadean eon, is divided into multiple eras. So, here you can see the various eons and eras. So there is a Hadean eon, Archean eon, where the oldest rocks and Earth's crust was formed. There is a Proterozoic eon, where the life began in the sea. And then there is a Phanerozoic eon, which is divided into eras, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. So here you can see the three eras of the Phanerozoic eon, Paleozoic era, Mesozoic era, and Cenozoic era. So these eras are further divided into different periods. For example, the Paleozoic era can be divided into the Cambrian period, in which what we called as this Cambrian explosion took place. So first fish, first chordates were seen in this Cambrian period. Then there was Ordovician period, Silurian period, Devonian period, Carboniferous period, and Permian period. And also there was in the Mesozoic era, Triassic period, and there was a Jurassic period. It is the period where the dinosaurs diversified, and there is the Cretaceous period. So likewise, we can divide eras into periods, and in periods there were major events that took place. So we'll discuss the eras within the Phanerozoic eon. So first era in the Phanerozoic eon is Paleozoic era, in which the Cambrian explosion took place, which is the sudden increase in animal diversity. Key events which happened in this Paleozoic era were marine algae uh, diversification, which is we could see abundant amounts of marine algae. Then land colonization by fungi, plants, and animals took place in Paleozoic era. There was diversification of vascular plants with the colonization of land. Then first tetrapods and insects were formed. Dominance of amphibians took place. First seed plants were formed. Reptiles originated, and some mass extinctions took place. So mass extinctions are five major events that reshape biodiversity. And in the Mesozoic era, the dominant life forms were gymnosperms or the corn-bearing plants. Dinosaurs evolved and radiated in the Mesozoic era. So this word radiation here means starting from a common ancestor and uh, diversifying. It's not related to this radiation related to these X-rays, radioactivity, likewise. That is not related to this radiation. This radiation means here starting from a common ancestor and diversifying and evolving to various forms of life. So dinosaurs evolved and radiated in the Mesozoic era, and the origin of mammals has also taken place in the Mesozoic era. Uh, and with the end, towards the end of this Mesozoic era, there was appearance of the flowering plants, or angiosperms, and the mass extinction of dinosaurs took place in the Mesozoic era itself. And there is the Cenozoic era, where the radiation of mammals, birds, pollinating insects took place, angiosperms or flowering plants dominated, and primate groups evolved. And these bipedal ancestors, those who have two legs, walking by two legs, appeared in the Cenozoic era. And the origin of the genus Homo was there. Then let's move on to theories of evolution. Right, the first theory that we are going to discuss is Lamarck theory, which was published in 1809. So the principles that Lamarck used for his theory was the use and disuse principle. So what he told was body parts which are used extensively become larger and stronger. So that we see if you go to the gym and do exercise, you can see your muscles uh, will grow and unused parts deteriorate. So likewise, if you do not use some muscles, they will reduce in size. So that observation was true, but what Lamarck proposed was these acquired characteristics get inherited. That means they can get transferred from one generation to another. So this is not a proven theory, so this is disproven later. So the example that Lamarck gave is giraffes stretching necks to reach higher leaves. So he said these acquired characteristics pass from generation to generation, but this is disproven by modern geneticists. You can see earlier the giraffe species were short-necked ones, so they kept stretching the neck to reach the leaves higher up on a tree, which resulted in longer necked giraffes. And Lamarck proposed that this characteristic of long neck can get transferred to the uh, next generation. So the important theory that we discuss now is called Darwin-Wallace theory, or the theory of natural selection. So this is independently proposed by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. So the observations that they made were variations. So they observed that variation exists among individuals in a population, and species produced more offspring than the environment can support. For example, if you consider uh, a snail can lay thousands of eggs at a given instance. But so that is a very much that is a very large amount. If you consider one snail can produce thousands of eggs within his lifetime. That is for one time. Right? So, but that is higher than needed. So most of these eggs they do not survive until they rupture and become snails. And this is another observation that was made by Darwin and Wallace. So the interpretations of the observations, individuals with favorable traits survive and reproduce more successfully. And over time, favorable traits accumulate in the population. So these are the interpretations. So the examples for favorable characteristics were escaping predators, tolerating environmental stresses, efficient food acquisition, disease resistance, reproductive success. So they are examples for favorable characteristics. So this process of natural selection involves first overproduction of offspring. So a lot of offspring is produced. So these offspring contain variations among individuals, and there is competition for resources, and then there is survival of the fittest in the competition, and the survived individuals passed their favorable traits to the next generations. This is called inheritance. So this is the process of natural selection: overproduction, variation, competition, survival of the fittest, and inheritance of favorable traits. This is the HMS Beagle, the ship that Charles Darwin traveled around the world, and he traveled to this island here in the Pacific Ocean called Galapagos Island, where he collected a lot of species evidences and did, which resulted in experiments leading to his theory. So this is his voyage of the HMS Beagle from 1831 to 1836. Currently, we are using a modified version of Darwin's theory called Neo-Darwinism. So here we integrate modern theories to Darwin's theory of natural selection, including Mendelian genetics and population genetics. And now we know about this DNA and genes and how they transfer genetic information from one generation to the next. Likewise, this Darwin's theory has been modified in the modern era. So finally, if you move on to the first slide that I have shown you, so this shows you a scientist or an old gentleman holding a skull, a human-like skull. So this is Svante Paabo, who won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2022. So he's a Swedish scientist who discovered the genetic makeup of the extinct Neanderthals, allowing their genome to be compared to that of modern humans. So we'll discuss the other parts of the lesson in another video. Until that, you can again go through this video for further clarifications. If you have any questions regarding this, you can just leave a comment to this video. Thank you.